Hey there, old school gamers. Welcome to another feedback discussion. The picture for today's feedback discussion is a peasant village with lots of peasant workers, because today's discussion is about commoners and NPCs and stuff like that. So several people have contributed to the thoughts for this feedback discussion. One of the major people who did commented on a previous video here on this channel, and that is Mike J here on YouTube. So thank you, Mike, for stimulating this feedback discussion. So the idea that I'm going to talk about here came from old Dragon magazines, when Dragon magazine was a print magazine, and also I remember seeing it in sort of an advanced options book from second edition. There was a kind of an advanced options series of books there for second edition. And the idea to kind of simulate the world around your character, when your character opens up, his or its eyes in the morning, just like when we open our eyes in the morning here on real life Earth, we're on a world that has billions of other people besides ourselves on it. And there's societies around us, some form of country. I mean, if you're a hermit in a cave, I guess that doesn't matter because you're probably not, listening to YouTube videos. But we're surrounded by people, and so your player characters in a role-playing game are surrounded by these NPCs, and the NPCs don't know that they're NPCs. That's a topic for another video that's coming up soon on creating a fully fleshed out NPCs on the fly, because that's another feedback discussion. That's another thing that somebody was talking about on our Discord channel. But for today, there's this theory that I'd like to introduce, and that is that if you think about the people in the world, like what level should the NPCs be if the NPCs have character classes? So there are two types. First of all, I would divide it into two types of NPCs. There's NPCs that are major players in your story arc. Like if the big bad enemy is a powerful archmage, like your archetype of the Dark Lord Sauron or something, or then you might be that might be a 30th level mage, or, because our campaign goes to 30 because we include the epic levels. There's a 5th edition third-party epic book that I like to use for D&D, or if your game caps at 20th level or whatever. Particular NPCs that are designed to fit your story arc, for instance, that Dark Lord might have a lieutenant, and that lieutenant might be a 25th level fighter or something, the general of all their armies and stuff. So there are certain NPCs that are story point NPCs. They're there as part of the story, and they would certainly have levels appropriate to that. But, that's easy, to cover, but because we just did. Now, the other category, though, is where this theory comes in. The other category is for just simulating the world around the player characters. There was a series in the 80s called The Sword and the Flame, and in this series a group of D&D players were transported from real life Earth to a D&D world, the campaign world of their dungeon master, in the bodies of their characters, with a set of memories and skills and abilities of their characters. So they may have had the minds of college kids from Earth in the 80s, because the book came from the 80s. So they may have had the minds of 1980s college kids, but suddenly the fighter knew how to fight. Like, you put a sword in his hand, he just instinctively knew what to do with it, because he'd entered, the body and life of his character. Or the thief, because they called them thieves back then, not rogues. But the thief knew how to pick pockets, even though in real life he'd had no such training. And of course the mages had spells and so on. And the cleric could heal people. The novel was done very well. Like, for instance, since the cleric didn't actually worship the goddess, at least at first, she couldn't recharge her spells, because she didn't really know how to pray, and she didn't really have the clerical training. So that was one of the obstacles that the group had, was that, yeah, she could heal, but she could only heal up to the level of ability that she had when she started the game session, before they got on her character sheet before they got transported into the world. So she had to actually learn to embrace the goddess, and in order to be able to pray and recharge her spells and get more healing. But what these characters did in the Sword and the Flame series was they started assessing the levels of people around them, and they started trying to think about game mechanics and how game mechanics would apply to their lives now that they were actually in the world. And so at one point, the fighter, the tank, the brick of the party, he enters this big gladiatorial competition in a big city with a big prize, and they really need the prize, and it's an important plot point that he win. And at one point, the party's kind of talking to him between fights, and they're saying, man, how could you possibly do this? You know, your character's only mid-level. What happens when some high-level badass comes along? You know, you're just going to get wiped. And he basically, because they're still thinking about game mechanics and how game mechanics translate into their experience of the lived world. And he points out that he doesn't think there's going to be any high-level badasses at the tournament, because the high-level badasses have all become kings and generals and field marshals and mercenary warlords and stuff like that. They don't show up for this kind of stuff. Like these tournaments. These tournaments are like petty to those guys. So and that kind of gets back to one of the first videos that I did in this new series about how high-level characters in old-school gaming should become an actual part of the world and stuff like that. Kings and queens and nobles and warlords and stuff. But martial arts master gurus and things like that other people go learn from. Important religious figures for clerics and so on. But basically, so if you think about what levels people would be in the world, this idea kind of goes like this. 90% of the people in the world do not have a character class of adventuring type. They might be a cook or a barkeeper or a blacksmith or a teamster, laborer, fisherman, something like that, cobbler, artist, tailor. Most people are not going to have any kind of adventuring class. They're not going to be a fighter or a cleric or a mage or anything like that. And so only about 10% of the people in the world have an adventuring class. Of those 10% of the people in the world that actually have an adventuring class, 90% of them don't make it past 10th level before they retire or just stop advancing. And my evidence or my proof for this is when you look at old first and second edition materials, and you look at how villages and things or small towns were fleshed out, usually those villages or small towns would have a constable or a sheriff, and that constable or sheriff might be like a 5th level fighter. And that 5th level fighter might have had some adventuring days in their past, or they might have had days as a soldier or a mercenary in their past, and that's how they got their 5 fighter levels. But now they're a little older and time to settle down, and going out and facing violence all the time, it gets you killed. So they settle down in this little town as the sheriff or the constable, where things aren't nearly as dangerous as going out and being an adventurer or a merc or a soldier. But they would, so 5th level was enough for them in their life. And so 90% of the people in the world do not have a character class. 90% of the people who have a character class, they never make it past 10th level. And then their lives are fine in the world, in their D&D or Pathfinder or Old School Essentials or, whatever system you like to use, but whatever fantasy game world you use, they're fine. And your player characters then, and major villains, and major NPCs, people like Drizzt Do'Urden, people like Elminster, major NPCs, big villains, your player characters, those are like the 1% of the 1%. Those are the people who are ambitious enough to continue to level up to the maximum of their character class. Those are the people who are willing to level up to become the fullness of all a fighter can be, or the fullness of all a paladin can be, or the fullness of all a cleric or a mage or a sorcerer can be. Or whatever you include in your campaign, psionicist, what have you. Those are the people who feel ambitious enough, are driven enough to I mean, let's face it, the player characters are the main characters of your world, right? I mean, it helps enrich the gaming experience to make the NPCs realistic and stuff, but the player characters are still the main people. If it was a book or a movie or a TV show, that would be the people that it would be about. So, so they are truly like the 1% of the 1%, but the people around them, 90% don't have a class. If they do, 90% of them don't make it past 10th level. So that's so when you're at one of the tables that I run, that's kind of the that's what I do. I mean, so if you meet somebody, an NPC in at one of my tables, and you start to suspect that they're higher than 10th level, then maybe there's something special about them. You know, maybe they're actually a polymorph dragon, or maybe, you know, they're instead of pretending to be a humble acolyte or a humble low-level cleric, maybe they're like some high-level cleric who's on a secret mission on the down low or something. But yeah, so people above 10th level should be rare, but they should exist in significant numbers enough. You know, somebody's got to be above 10th level. You know, Drizzt Do'Urden is obviously above 10th level. You know, Elminster is obviously above 10th level, and so on and so forth. But what do you think? So let us know here at Grumpy Old GMs, and we will, you know, always be open to having feedback discussions on any topic that's important to you. And in the meantime, we'll see you around the gaming table. Hey, if you'd like to actually play with me as the DM or one of the other Grumpy Old GMs you might see on this channel, then reach out to our Discord. If you're seeing this on YouTube, it'll be in the comments down below. And if you're seeing this on TikTok, then just look for Grumpy Old GM's Discord server, or come to our website, even better, even easier, grumpyoldgms.com. And if there's space at our tables, then, you know, because I'm an actual real person, not one of these AI GMs that apparently D&D Beyond is supposed to be getting. Since I'm actually a real person, I only have so many nights and so many spaces at the table. But I keep the website pretty updated as to whether there's room at a table. So if you think about gaming with us, check out grumpyoldgms.com. All right, we will see you around the gaming table.